The Lord be with you. A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Luke. Glory to you, O Lord. On a Sabbath, Jesus went to dine at the home of one of the leading Pharisees, and the people there were observing him carefully. He told a parable to those who had been invited, noticing how they were choosing the places of honor at the table. When you are invited by someone to a wedding banquet, do not recline at table in the place of honor. A more distinguished guest than you may have been invited by him, and the host who invited both of you may approach you and say, "Give your place to this man." And then you would proceed with embarrassment to take the lowest place. Rather, when you are invited, go and take the lowest place, so that when the host comes to you, he may say, "My friend, move up to a higher position." Then you will enjoy the esteem of your companions at the table. For everyone who exalts himself will be humbled, but the one who humbles himself will be exalted. The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ.
Yeah, it's a great little parable. I don't know, it says something about the human heart, that this lesson, as it were, is evergreen. Yeah, the 2,000 years on, and Jesus still has the capacity, with words that were spoken 2,000 years ago, he has the capacity to reach our hearts, to convict us of our errant ways, and to revive us according to his plan, according to God's plan. We have to keep in mind, of course, that this is a parable. Yeah, it's not a piece of social advice. It might work as a piece of social advice, but this is not the point for Jesus. It's interesting also, I think, that we have a little bit of the scene has been cut out. We have something like 6 verses here where Jesus cures a man, right? So he's on a Sabbath, he went to dine at the home of one of the leading Pharisees. The people were observing him carefully. And you think, okay, well, they're observing him carefully. What do you do when people observe you carefully? I don't know. Nothing. Man. Try to do nothing. At least try to do nothing wrong. And what is the definition of doing something wrong? Something that's not going to draw their ire, right? Nothing that's going to give them the opportunity to needle you or to go after you. And what does Jesus do? He cures a man on the Sabbath. He's been getting in trouble for it. At this point, for most of the gospel, he's been getting in trouble for it, and he just do it again. Why not? See if it changes this time. No, it's not the point. It's because he's so intent on the man who has come to him. That's all he sees. I mean, I know, he's God, he knows what's going to happen, he's going to draw their ire anyway, and whatever, but he's intent on loving the person in front of him, even though it costs him his life, right? This is the point. He's offending them on what they consider to be the most sacred thing. He knows that is going to get him into a lot of trouble. It doesn't matter. He has to love, he's compelled to love because he's God. He has to love the person in front of him. That's who God is. And by loving him, he also creates the opportunity to love his detractors, to love the people that oppose him, the people who have a different agenda, the people who in their own understanding of the Sabbath law have no space in that for the curing of a man with an affliction. They can untie their animals and take them out to drink and to eat, but they can't see a man unbound from what is afflicting him. And this is Jesus' point, right? What kind of Sabbath law is this? We've turned it on its head. So now what we see is Jesus working in deed and in word. He's working to turn the world right side up, to turn Israel right side up, so that Israel can get back to the work of turning the world right side up. That's what they were always meant to do. What is the big challenge that he sees in front of him playing out, and not just playing out in this social setting, is pride. Right? Pride, not only in terms of inflated self-estimation, like one to the other, because there's a jockeying for position here as it relates. He sees a jockeying for position as it relates to people taking their place at table. Okay, now any of that weighs down the celebration that Jesus intends to have and live out as Israel's true king, as Israel's God returning to his people at last. There ought to be celebration all around him. You say you can feel Jesus lifting up everyone around him. Okay, like, yes, party, okay? And everybody's looking around at each other, trying to figure out what the pecking order is. This is boring. So it's going, it's boring. It's boring in the most terrible way. It frustrates the design of God, the whole thing. Anyone looking around at all at anyone else is frustrating the design of God. If there is no better way to destroy a convivial party, right, a real kind of communal celebration, than to start thinking about who ranks where. It's just absurd. Instead, there ought to be every say boat is buoyed by the fact that Jesus is on the scene. Right, he is the rising tide that floats all boats. He's doing it, and we ought to be all going along with him. And instead, we're just looking around at each other to see where we rank. Now, he's seeing that in a social setting, but he sees it as a massive problem as it relates to the plan of God, as it relates to God's design. So you can hear it in what I said. He's raising everybody up, and everybody is. Not everybody, but people are looking around one to the other. It's an exercise of pride, and it has everybody sink. Because there's no, in this sense, there's no right reception of what Jesus is doing. He just healed a man. Everyone ought to be rejoicing. Wow, what power is this at work in this man? How grateful we are to be on the scene as this is happening. But hold on, am I better than that guy, or am I worse than that guy, or am I better than that guy? Do I think that do I think that the Pharisee would have me in this position or that position? Come on, right? Comparison kills joy, right? We know that little phrase. But this is what's going on in the eyes of God. So what's happening is God's doing this great thing, and we're taking our eyes off of him. That's pride. That is the problem of pride. And guess what? The person at the top and the person at the bottom, if they're playing that game of comparison, they're both indulging pride, and they've both taken their eyes off of God. So it's this again, humility is not a matter of thinking less of yourself, it's thinking of yourself less. It's in the sense that and this is then, properly speaking, that is itself the antidote to pride. It's humility. Why is thinking of yourself less a humble move? Because it embraces the reality that you were created by God in his image and likeness, and God is pure self-gift. God is the one who does not look at himself. God is the one whose gaze is totally fixed on the other. And so the humble thing, knowing ourselves to be created by God, made in his image and likeness, the humble thing to live in the truth of that is to keep our gaze fixed outside of ourselves. Is why we have to live the life of pure self-gift, inspired by God. So his life breathed into us, its proper effect is that we live pure self-gift. We don't have eyes on ourselves. We live life without mirrors. Right? We are living totally for God, outpouring of self, worship, praise, right? Prayer, all outside of ourselves. And then as we do that, we're made fit to serve him, right? That life of service, that life of love that he's called us to, also outside of ourselves. But it's not as though we lose ourselves, but we're giving ourselves. God is pure self-gift. In this sense, he's not pure self-forgetfulness, understood improperly, like there's no self, but he's pure self-gift. And he's more, and this is us really, we're more substantial the more we reflect God in that capacity. There's more of us when we're giving ourselves away. It's a paradox. Right? There's more substance to me when I'm giving myself away, both in praise of God and in his service. This is the dynamic at the heart of it all. This is why Jesus can come back and say, everyone who exalts himself will be humbled, but the one who humbles himself will be exalted. Because we exalt ourselves, we're thinking too much of ourselves. I can say, sometimes we're thinking too highly, but sometimes, even when we're thinking like too, I don't know how to say it actually, but when we're thinking too poorly of ourselves, that is self-exaltation. Because you're trying to get control of the situation. Right? So it's like, and then you condemn yourself so as to get control of the situation. And it's just as bad as putting yourself on top. Right? The challenge is to not exalt ourselves, and I will say one way or the other, because pushing ourselves down is a self-exaltation because it puts me at the middle and it pushes God out to the side. So we have to be careful also with this kind of self-exaltation. Everyone who exalts himself will be humbled, but the one who humbles himself will be exalted. The one who humbles himself will be exalted because he it is who embraces the love of God. Right? He it is who recognizes the truth that God has made all things out of love. And he is intent on living that reality. The humble man is the one who sees God as a benevolent and provident father who wants nothing more than to love his children into life. And the humble one receives the great gift of God and rejoices in his own blessed life, and in so doing becomes a conduit of his blessed life to the world that desperately needs reviving. But it's only the heart that is formed in gratitude, in reception of God's gift, that will be the heart that pours itself out gratefully and joyfully in his service.